Hello, it's been a while since I've made a video, but here I am. And I'm going to try to be better about it. I'm also looking at putting together a newsletter. I'm very inspired. Kathy Bond does a great job keeping in touch with her constituents. I had been invited to a thing on yesterday, Saturday, a meeting that she has these things regularly with her constituents. And I got feedback from people that were there that they had watched my videos. So here I am. I'm going to try to be better at this and keep up. I am going to limit this to the subject of the assessment tests and the cut scores that were voted on. I did find one title, I forgot the name for it, that KWCH, Channel 12 News, had written, the Kansas Board of Education votes to change state assessments. Most of them stayed in the lane of we changed the cut scores, but it always, on most of them, gave the impression that somehow we had changed the state assessment, which in practice is what we did, okay? But that is not what the vote was actually for. So there's a lot of nuance here, and I want you guys to understand what I am trying to understand. So understand these are my opinions of Debbie Potter, District 10, not the opinions of the State Board of Education, obviously. But anyway, Kansas Department of Education had this title on their article: Kansas State Board of Education approves new state assessment cut scores. Now, they know exactly what they're saying and they know exactly what they're doing. So I'm going to break that title down for you so that you can understand a little bit better the nuances of it. Kansas State Board of Education, so the responsibility falls on us, approves new state assessment. So that's a foregone conclusion that there's a new state assessment cut scores. Okay, so what we approved were cut scores. So you could read that article title as Kansas State Board of Education approves cut scores. Okay, which is what we did. The new state assessment was never up for vote, never up. Well, I can't say it wasn't up for conversation because back in maybe May, I think it was, somewhere, give or take a month, in May, I asked Mrs. Fultz if we could overlap this new test that was a foregone conclusion that they wanted. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that we would have it, by the way, at that time. At that time, we were still under the impression, or at least I was, under the impression that that vote remained for the future, that we were going to have to vote at some point to change the assessment test. So I was in, because I'm trying to hear my constituents, and they didn't want the assessment changed because they said that they wanted to be able to compare it year to year to year. And if you change it, well, you just change the target. So now how the kids did last year has no comparison to what they did this year. They're trying to say that they can go back and somehow make a match. I don't believe it. They can. I don't think anybody who's asked me to represent them not to change that test are going to believe that. So that's over there. So, and in the future, I haven't been given it yet, but what I want to focus on is the idea, and I thought this was awesome because God just provides for people like me. I was confused why we were not voting whether or not to change the state assessment at all. And then I was further alarmed and confused to realize that they hadn't even given the original state assessment test. They just didn't give it. They gave the new state assessment test without any prior approval, vote, discussion on changing the test by our board. So preemptively, and by God's provision, the chair, if you will go back and look at our meeting videos, I don't remember which month that was, whatever month they said we voted on the cut scores, probably August, yeah, it was probably August. Anyway, but you'll hear our chair preemptively say that the vote was in November of 2019. That didn't ring right to me, that in 2019, that board would have the power to state what assessment test we're going to be giving in 2025, as if we don't have the power to decide what assessment tests will be given our kids, our students in Kansas, by this board. This board has no say in it. They decided back in 2019 that this new assessment is what they were going to give. And oh, by the way, sight unseen, Commissioner, you do it all. Let's see, the words that basically were used were develop, administer, analyze, and report. All on you. Kansas Department of Education, State Board, we're done with it. It's all yours. You give whatever test you see fit, and we will vote on the cut scores. That is how it went down. Okay. Since I was given the date, November 2019, I was able to go back and watch that YouTube. And clearly there's a lot of history involved with it. They were talking about Title I and footprints. And I did try to call one of the former, two of the former board members. I only got a hold of one about this. And to say, was that your intention? And I should call Jim McNeese. He's the one that made the motion. Was your intention to state that the Department of Education could administer whatever assessment tests they came up with all the way through, by the way, June 30 of 2026? So I guess if they want to change the state assessment test by June 30, 2026, they could do it again if they wanted to. Apparently, interpreting it the way the chair interpreted that is what happened. That somehow our commissioner has a blank check to administer whatever test he wants. Now, that's my opinion, okay? That's how I'm reading this. So, or how I'm reading, they read it. How I read it is different. What I read in this motion is that there was apparently an agreement with the vendor year after year after year after year to administer the tests that we had in place. And with that, there was something to do with a smaller footprint, with Title I. It sounds like, and I don't know this is where I haven't gotten the answers yet. It sounds like, though, there was some federal directive that affected them that said it was wasteful to do this year after year after year after year, to reprocure every year. And they said it's more efficient, smaller footprint. I think this is where the smaller footprint came in. I'm not sure. That this be set for, it would appear to be about a 7-year period of time instead of year to year, 7-year period of time. And the amount not to exceed $36 million. That was for the contract, not to exceed $36 million. So apparently they would do all of this work for those 7 years, not to exceed $36 million. I'd love somebody to figure that out. And I have just fly by. Anyway, I don't read this that way. Okay. One, because I don't think that it doesn't pass the smell test. What board is going to determine for a board 7 years in the future what assessment tests they must give? That I don't know. That doesn't sit well with me. But when it says, for the purpose of developing, administering, analyzing, and reporting state assessments, plural, for the contract, that tells me that the assumption was that it would be the same test, and the assessments would be that same test over a 7-year period of time. There's 7 of them. Okay, that's a plural word. So that tells me that what they're asking is the developing, administering, analyzing, and reporting. Every year they have to develop new questions, replenish them, take off questions that the ones they gave us for the practice thing that we got to take. They're always recycling them. They're always cleaning them up, administering that test, analyzing that test, all the things that they were doing year after year. These are all the things that they were doing year after year after year after year. Okay. And they have to, so what I am reading in this is that they were saying, we will continue to do that test, but we're going to do it in a 7-year contract now. And so, Steve Roberts is the one who immediately pulled it from the consent agenda, and wanted his big concern was back to the Title I. Everybody wants to reduce the standardized testing footprint. I mean, almost without exception, only people who make money doing the testing while we're testing, nobody else wants. Okay, so this seemed like reducing that yearly workload and making it just one vendor, so you don't have a different vendor the next year that's having to reinvent the wheel, and then maybe a different vendor the next year that we're doing the same vendor, they're doing the same test over and over. Ta-da. That's what I think was going on. It was sent to us though as if that was the approval for a new test, a new utterly different test. And so for you to understand the setting of the cut scores that we voted on, that I voted against it because honestly, we had jumped this to get there. And there wasn't, the cut scores themselves for this test may very well be set where they should be. I know Beth Foltz works very hard at this. So for this test, it may be there, but it's totally a different test. It's not going to score the same. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to compare to the last test. It's just a different test. And so that vote was two things that were being combined into one and just try to pass the changing of the test. So understand that title from the Kansas Department of Education. When you read that, and you read it to your friends, Kansas State Board of Education approves new state assessment cut scores. We did not approve a new state assessment. I have no recollection of ever having presented to us to make a new state assessment at all. I don't see it in the November 2019 YouTube video either. I think it would have invited a lot more conversation besides if they were talking about a whole new assessment test being administered back then. I mean, look at how much news it's getting now. My own children are asking me about it, which is crazy because they don't really follow this stuff. They're asking me about it. So this is kind of a big deal. And it would have been a big deal in 2019 too. And so since it was not that big a deal in 2019, I don't think that this is what they thought they were doing. Just like us, we're only voting on cut scores. We were not voting on new assessment test. So here's my question to the minds that are smarter than mine out there. It is by statute the responsibility of the State Board of Education to set the assessment. The assessment was set at the standard assessment we've had for years. And who decided? Who made the decision to change that test? If it wasn't the board of 2019 and it wasn't the board of 2025, who did it? And by what authorization, by what power? Was it our chair acting on behalf of the board in between meetings? I mean, who did this? And that's the question that really, really needs to be answered, because our Constitution is set up so that the voters run education through their local boards, through their state board, through their legislature. Well, it doesn't sound like the parents, the local board, the state board, or the legislature made this decision, which means they're not controlling this decision, which affects education. And so that is my video. That is my question. And I don't want the answer in some Friday notes that nobody gets to see. And I am very annoyed by that too. Anyway, I'm under 15 minutes. Bye.